Hello, good day to all, and a very warm welcome. This is going to be a part two, just going over the aspects there that we raised in the last video on Peter and John's epistles, and adding a little new evidence as well. And obviously there are three ways to look at the epistles there, and I think John and Peter are obviously important ones. Jude and James are a lot smaller. Revelation just does its own thing and is not really talking about the gospel stories at all. Interestingly, it looks as though it was translated from Hebrew or Aramaic into Greek as well. So lots of these epistles come straight into the Greek and look as though they're really written by quite competent Greek literary figures, people who know, we don't know who they were, but they definitely knew how to write. It's the same for the gospel stories. So there's a refined, integrated, new textual, linguistic and historical insight here into a clearer, more cohesive argument. This is what we're putting out here. The focus remains on these four decisive issues, though. The suspicious flesh causes in the Petrine and Johannine epistles that resemble later anti-docetic formulas, and I'm slowly being convinced that the docetic, the name docetist or docetai doesn't really mean that much in these early times. If we're looking at what this gospel formula might well have been in just literary, mythic literary storytelling, then we don't need, and of course the celestial Jesus stuff there of Paul and so on, then we don't need this term docetic. It is either revelation and God, Jesus, God upstairs doing all of the things up there, or it's just straightforward mythic storytelling. The flesh clauses, not many of them, will go through them. The Deuteronomic tree, Ixylon or XYLON formula demonstrating that the earliest Christian death tradition was scriptural rather than historical, and of course mentions nothing about the crucifixion here on a tree, or crucifixion on a post, cross, whatever, and all of the other further detail in the Gospels. They're not there in these 5 epistles here. The epistles exclude exclusive use of future tense in coming language, showing no awareness of prior earthly Jesus. Now, it could just be that these writers were simply, I don't know, making mistakes, or just using this coming and forgetting to think about maybe a better usage of their the Greek here in returning or coming again, or a second coming. Of course, this would signpost and edge the probability here of what I'm saying towards more and more of a robust thesis, and the overwhelming pattern of interpolation and pseudepigraphy in early Christian literature as well, which must shape the likelihood ratios if we're getting Bayesian with these texts. So the suspect in the flesh clauses again, so we'll go through in the beginning. 1 Peter 2:24, in his body on the tree. 1 Peter 3:18, put to death in the flesh, made alive in the spirit. 1 Peter 4:1, Christ suffered in the flesh. 1 John now 4:2 and 3, Christ has come in the flesh, and 2 John 7, Christ coming in the flesh. Why these phrases look interpolated? They interrupt otherwise smooth theological reasoning. Okay, their vocabulary matches 2nd century anti-docetic polemic, not the earlier tone of the epistles. The letters contain no other references here to Jesus' earthly life, making these lines isolated anomalies. Interesting. Removing the clauses leaves the argument more coherent. And I'd suggest you read these. Just read the epistles there. You can go through them relatively quickly. Doesn't take too long. Their form mirrors known later interpolations, Ignatius's long recension. Again, so they read very similarly here. The short and the middle recensions of Ignatius, with these isolated claims of flesh, and he definitely came, he 100% came, but offering nothing else. It shows potential interpolation, but also just, I think in the case of Ignatius, just really poor reasoning and a lack of any other information in this early 2nd century writer. If these lines were added later, then the original authors made no claim at all about a physical incarnation. Their Christology was spiritual, cosmic, and revelation based. Simple as that. The tree formula comes from Deuteronomy. So in 1 Peter, when Jesus died on the tree, remember Exilon, it is quoted or alluding directly to Deuteronomy 21, 22 and 23, the Septuagint. He who hanged upon a tree is cursed by God, the tree being Exilon. Implications, this phrase here is scriptural, again, not historical. Paul uses the same formula in Galatians 3:13. No knowledge of the crucifixion in Jerusalem at all, or any aspect thereof. Acts repeats it 3 times. None of these texts describes a Roman crucifixion or mentions Pilate. This shows and I think when it comes to Acts, obviously we're talking about a point in time where this is still carried through, but Acts is clearly coming off of the end of Luke, and by that time the Gospels are in full flow. They're definitely beginning to stabilize. We still don't know what's in the first Gospel of Luke, but it's going to be fairly much like ours. This shows the earliest Christian death tradition is exegetical, not biographical. Jesus' death was first understood through Scripture rather than memory, and it comports well with 1 Corinthians 15, the resurrection narrative. Again, zero knowledge really of the gospel crucifixions, and Paul gets stuff wrong. He blatantly talking about 500 being seen quickly. First to Peter, well, where are the Marys? All of that stuff. So Jesus coming as a single future event across the Petrine and Johannine epistles. Jesus coming is described exclusively as a future event, again revealed at the last time, is awaited. The promise is coming now. What they never say, they do not speak of Jesus coming previously, returning, second coming, any of this. This aligns with Paul's earliest expectation of a future revelation from heaven. Remember Revelation's heavenly lamb. Again, this distinction between the epistolary literature and the gospel earth narrative now, not in the early strata. I'm sorry I keep going through this, but I find it so fascinating. Revelation manifestation appearing non-historical. The same deal. Now I want you to go straight down to here. So he never portrayed as living on earth, again, for teaching followers or interacting with named locals or political figures. The silence of this is humongous. The weight of historical precedent, interpolation was common. Very common. Likelihood that the suspicious lines in these epistles are interpolated is strengthened by the overwhelming evidence of textual modification in early Christianity. Widely recognized New Testament interpolations. Of course, we have the long ending in Mark 16:9-20, not in the earliest manuscripts, not said by Eusebius to be in the earliest manuscripts either. So double verification there. John 7:53 and 8:11, the adulterous woman comes later. I went through this in a video recently. For the earliest manuscripts do not have it, do not contain it. 1 John 5:7 and 8, the Johannine comma. 1 Corinthians 14, 34 to 35, 1 Thessalonians 2, 14 to 16, a very important one, Romans 16, 25 to 27. Some people are saying the whole of Romans 16 is just a chapter that's interpolated. Luke 22, again 19 to 20. And remember as well, with Luke, we have likely interpolations from an original Marcion as well. Whole chapters now, from chapter 1 to 3, interpolated, and also the Emmaus narrative, again, interpolated, either heavily or completely. Interpolations in Christian literature. Okay, so we have the Testimonium Flavianum, a work which I have shown continuously to be fraudulent and from different perspectives as well. I'm going to write a book on that one day, and all of the pagan witnesses, about 5 of them, and just again put it out there in 50 to 100 pages so that people really get the current scholarship on this and all of the best evidence is for and then against, so we can really take it apart and leave it behind us. Now we've got to move on and stop telling ourselves lies about the pagan witnesses here. They are not witnesses. Ignatius's long recension, again filled with in the flesh editions, not from Ignatius. Martyrdom of Polycarp, again a mythic storytelling fan fiction, nothing to do with Polycarp, and never ever attested in history. A completely phenomenal event, obviously burning and not burning and all of this stuff, expanded ending, all of this incorrect. Ascension of Isaiah and the chapter 11 earthly crucifixion interpolated on top of a heavenly crucifixion earlier on in Isaiah. Entire forged works, Second Peter, pastoral epistles, Titus and Timothy 1 and 2, 3 Corinthians, if you've ever heard of that, Acts of Paul and Thecla, letter to the Laodiceans. There's Peter's, even stuff like Peter's letters to Seneca, completely made up. Christian scribes frequently inserted anti-docetic slogans, anti-mythic slogans as well, harmonizing phrases or doctrinal clarifications into earlier texts. These suspicious clauses in 1st and 2nd Peter and 1st to 3rd John perfectly match these known patterns, all right, and they are, as I said, very small. You don't have to do much to interpolate these. They might even be marginal notes, who knows. The Bayesian impact, again, a high prior for interpolation. Because interpolation and pseudepigraphy were commonplace, any Bayesian analysis must adopt a high prior probability for stuff that gives you more information about the historical Jesus. And I'm not just being nasty here. One sec. Okay, so what do we have? The Bayesian analysis must adopt a high prior probability. Now, short doctrinal clarifications, isolated anti-heretical formulas, or scriptural reinterpretations. So obviously, when you have small little 3 or 4 word additions here that seem to interrupt flow, we have to ask what this is. Marginal gloss is could be a big factor here. Maybe we're talking about things like the James quote in Josephus. So this will obviously shift the priors and increase the likelihood ratio given this background information on the other examples, the myriad other examples of Christian addition over time and interpolation. So thank you. Thanks a lot. So the conclusion then, the refined evidence shows that the epistles of Peter and John contain a consistent non-historical Christology. Their portrayal of Christ is cosmic, revelatory, scriptural, and future-oriented, not biographical. The presence of isolated antidocetic clauses is best explained by later interpolation, especially given the overwhelming historical pattern of textual alteration in early Christianity. The letters therefore testify not to a remembered historical Jesus, but to a heavenly Christ revealed in vision and scripture, whose story was only later grounded in earthly narrative through gospel tradition. So we'll put this aside now. I think I really want to talk about other things, but I thought I'd go through Peter and John. And I've talked about this many times, and it is one of my go-to statements here, really, when I talk about these subjects and when I'm debating Christians and so on. Yeah, we have to move on from this. Everything is remarkably clear when talking about these earlier Christian texts, and even if they're talking about fleshy existence here, Jesus came in the flesh, there are still problems with even going down that route. And maybe they're not interpolations at all. Maybe these early Christians are trying to counter many other Christians who saw these things as allegorical, or scriptural allegorical, or if they were finding a Messiah there because he just wasn't coming in earthly form. And of course it doesn't appear that was going to happen for the Jews before the Second Temple's complete destruction. So anyway, I'll put that out there. Thank you very much. End of video. Cheers.